I'm going to be fixing my lad's Polo mk4 9N. Enjoy. Right, so what is wrong with it? Well, popped it in for an MOT and it failed on emissions. Not unusual. It's a 2002 Polo 9N 1.2 litre 3-cylinder weapon. It's brilliant. I love driving this thing. It is so solid. Really nice thing to drive around with. So I want to try and fix it. The paint will be sorted out at another point. But what I've basically done is I've fired up the VAGCOM diagnostics through my computer and used one of the cables that's available online, ready to connect and see what the lambda sensors are doing. Now, there's two lambda sensors. There's one that's peeking out underneath there, and there's one at the base after the catalytic converter. And the one that's underneath the catalytic converter should be relatively static, and the one that's above should be wavering around all over the place. And both of them are wavering around all over the place. So, having had a chat with Richie, not me, Richie over at the garage behind me, he suggested, well, to be honest, without even hooking it up to anything, there's a fair chance that if the bottom lambda sensor is all over the shop, then the cat's gone. These things, aftermarket things, are generally good for 50 to 80,000 miles. So I've had to buy another one. We'll see if it fixes the problem. And it's down there. Look at that. Picked it up. It's a BM Cat. Oh my goodness, let's get it out of the car. There we go. It's a BM Cat. It came with a fitting kit, which is literally just a gasket and probably a seal for the bottom end down here, I guess. Yes. Seal and nuts. I think it came in at about 140 odd quid. It's not the end of the world either. Look at that. It's all there. Right, okay, so I need to get the old unit off the car. Now, literally have just driven this thing up here. I'm working handheld at the moment. I will move to a tripod, because I know sometimes these things can get a little bit bouncy all over the fucking place. Right, it's a pretty straightforward job. Air filter, engine cover needs to come off. They're never difficult. There are a couple of pipes on the side here that you'll need to pull out, and then the whole unit will come off the car like that. Nice, eh? Now, this is still a bit warm, so probably going to leave it to cool down a bit, but in the meantime I can get rid of a lot of the electrics and bits. So if I bring the camera over, when you're looking down, that's the cap. Okay, there's the top lambda, the bottom lambda's down there. Okay, 3 bolts at the bottom, and I think there's 6 bolts, nuts at the top here. But really, I want to get all of this electrics out of the way first and foremost. So we've got the coil packs, we've got the wiring down to the back of the alternator, and it's all in the way, really, because the exhaust and cap will need to come upwards and out of the engine bay. I'm also going to need to get the under tray off down there, because I need to access the 3 bolts at the bottom. If we look at the new unit, it gives you a reasonable understanding. So we've got 3 threaded fixings on the bottom, 2, 4, 6, 7 fixings at the top, 2 fixings here which look to be mounting, or maybe heat shield goes onto these fixings here. Okay, and then there's mounting points down here. It's always useful to look at these things and see what's going on. Then when you look in the cap, it should look like that. So we'll start really just by disconnecting the battery, which I think, if I remember right, is a 10mm socket. It might be 8. No, it's 10. Look at that. Just disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. There we go. Nice and safe. We're not going to create sparks. Next thing I'm going to do really is to pull each of these connectors off. Now, these style of connectors, they cause a kerfuffle, and what often happens is people don't know how to take them off, so they muller them, like that one. It's been mullered, okay? Such that the connector up here, the only way we could get it to fit in there was by wedging matchsticks in the back of it, because it's been mullered. Not by me, by previous owners. And then what happens is they can't get them to fit, so they glue them. But basically what you need to do is to push the connector that way while you're lifting the lever this way. Okay, so push that way, pull the lever, you with me? And then the whole thing comes off. It is no more difficult than that. However, when they get mullered like this, they become a pain in the balls. So pushing the connector that way, pull the lever this way, connector comes off. Every fucking time. You don't need all of these little things that force it apart, because all you end up doing is breaking the connector. Okay, this one I'm going to struggle with, because it's just... Ow, that's warm. It's that broken that I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to have to find a way of getting it off. Probably put a screwdriver on there and see if I can push it in and pull the tab out, because the end of the tab is missing. Not unusual, I'm afraid, folks. Stupid is as stupid does. Also need to disconnect the lambda wiring as well. So I don't quite know where the connector is for the lambda. We'll find that out in a minute, because obviously I need to unwind that from its boss. C-spanner should do that. May take the electrics off the back of the alternator. May just see if I can lever all of the wiring forwards just out of the way. Coil packs come out fairly easily. They lift out of the way. I'll take that connector off in a second. It all needs a bit of a clean up down here, doesn't it? It's all a bit ganky. I'll check the belt while I'm down here as well. I mean, this is my lad's car, like I say, and I gave it a mini service recently, just before its MOT, so it's had new plugs in it and so forth, and filters. But other than that, not a lot really has happened to this car. There's quite a lot of room in it though. Right, let me see if I can get that connector off. Right, I think the only way I'm going to be able to do this is with a screw in through that hole and push the connector in while I pull the screw out. I remember this one was a bastard to get out when I was doing the plugs. I suspect I might have to see if I can find another connector and splice it onto the loom. I mean, honestly, who fucks these things up like this? I suspect this may have gone a bit too far, this one. There we go. That's worked. In fact, there is no clip in there at all. Oh, fucking thing. Right, that can come out. Right, that's got that out. Thank you very much. Now, I think next thing, let's get the fixings that hold, not necessarily this rail, but the plastic rail. There's an earth wire up here. Volkswagen Earth Brown. Lucas Constant Live Battery Unfused Brown. So don't get confused between your Lucas and your Volkswagen electrics. Now it looks here really like one screw, and the rest of it looks to be held on here on clips. So we should be able to really just loosen this thing off. I don't want to disconnect all the injectors and everything, because there's no issue with any of that. So these just look like standard Torx head settings. Beware on Volkswagen, I've noticed in the past that sometimes they adopt not a Torx, which is a 6-sided head. That'll be a Torx, and they generally come T30, T40, etc, etc, etc. Certainly on the drive shafts and so forth, they adopt a 12-pointed fixing. So yeah, get the tools pretty much anyway. In fact, the head bolts are 12-pointed, you see. So you could probably use a Torx in there, but you're only going to end up mullering the Torx bit and the bolt. So get yourself a decent set of 12-bolt fixings. The only other suggestion I would have is that when you remove a bolt, a fixing, put it back once you can, purely because otherwise you'll be battling with where all the fixings and everything come from. Now it looks like, oh, just one clip there, look at that. One clip holds that in place. That's good. So I can pop that bolt now back into the cam cover, whatever it is, so I don't end up spending a week looking for that. Now, the bolt at the top here is hex, which is unusual, isn't it? Right, I'm going to guess it's the same size as that one. Maybe, maybe not. That one will do nicely. Let's pop that back in there. So that was a T30 for that bolt. It is a hex 5mm for this one. Might need to go a bit Allen key on it, and that's going to be in the way as well. That was a pain. It'll be a 10mm. It's loose anyway. Look at that. One loose nut there. That's the nut that holds the coolant expansion tank in place. So can I get that out of the way? No, of course you can't, Richard. Of course you can't. I guess a little bit like things like French cars. Everything is bloody 10mm on this. That's not going to undo. So one was as loose as a Kansas City hooker, and the other one was tight as I don't know what. And that's chuff. If you've not followed my channel before, by the way, I do talk bollocks, I'm afraid. It's just one of those things. Right, if I loosen this rail off here, that should be enough now to pull that out of the way. No, because it's going to need that one off first. Oh, nothing's ever flipping easy, is it? Never mind. I'll take that one out. I'm going to put all these fixings back in a second, don't worry. Rest thy sphincters. So that comes out. Then I can move that out of the way to get that on there. And the only reason I want to do this is because it's an earth wire that goes down to probably the alternator. Nothing particularly nasty yet. Right, that comes off there. There's the earth wire out of the way. Pop that back in. That's gone in on the piss. Which probably suggests it's gone in on the piss in the past. Come on, you bastard. The trouble is it's hot. Probably could have done with cooling the engine down a bit first and foremost, couldn't I? But I can do some of this ancillary work while I'm getting ready to do this job. This rail is actually looking relatively free. What I need to do, I think, is work out where the cat wire, the top lambda wire, goes in. So just separating out the connectors that hold this thing in. Looks like it holds on underneath. It does. Oh, zip ties. Excellent. Oh, yeah. So I got the connector apart. The easiest way to do this, by the way, because you've got to take the under tray off anyway, is to do it from underneath. So let me get down there. And here you can see there's the other end of that connector. I've also then undone the flexi pipe for the exhaust. You can see the lower lambda sensor is down here, nice and easy to access. I disconnected it from the bottom end of the cat. Interestingly, one of these studs was completely, and I don't mean a little bit, completely missing its nut. So I will have a look in the cat when it all comes off, but it does look like there's just two more fixings. There's one here that looks to be hex-headed, and there's one here tucked up behind the starter motor. So I'm rather hoping I'm going to be able to get in there without taking the starter motor off. I did think briefly, using my Pilates to get myself back up again, did briefly think about taking the wiring off the back of the alternator, but to be honest, once this is pulled over, I've got enough room to be able to lift this exhaust up, I think. Once these are all off, there is enough room, I think, just to be able to manoeuvre everything past. I haven't got my bloody lambda spanner with me, so once the exhaust is off, then I will take the top lambda sensor off, and then I started looking at the fixings here. So 2, 4, 6, 7 fixings 12mm, using a 6-sided socket because I am not expecting these to come off very easily. So I've soaked with a penetrating fluid, which is in here somewhere. There we go. I'm just going to stand in front of the fan for a minute because we're about 7,000% humidity today. Looking forward to thunder this afternoon, I think. Just using a... Don't use basic WD-40, use the penetrant stuff, because it will get in and look at the threads. But I need to get underneath and undo those 2 fixings that hold the base of the cat. So if we look at the cat, the 2 fixings that I've just been talking about underneath the car go in through these holes here. Okay, you can see this thing's been cut out using a, I don't know, someone's used a, what's his name, a plasma cutter to cut that, I think. Right, okay. Right, we are where we are. So let me pop that back in there again. Fucking ham-fisted gibbon. Right, that can go back in there. So yeah, start getting these fixings off. Undo the 2 mountings at the bottom for now. And then 12mm, 6-sided socket. You probably would find a normal 12mm socket would go over the top of them, but I generally find when you get nuts that are that rusty, you will often find you'll take the shoulders off them. When you take the shoulders off them, then you start cursing. Now, the other thing I did notice while I was up here, by the way, look at the cracks on this manifold up here. It's not beautiful, is it? I'm going to crack on with this. I'm not going to video every single component because I need to get on with it, and it's going to rain soon, so I want to get on with that. The only other thing, by the way, I have done up here, which I probably didn't tell you, just pop something over the throttle inlet, won't you? Because if you start dropping screws and shit in there, it's going to end up in the cylinders. So I've just put a plastic glove over the top of that. 2 fixings at the bottom end of the cat that hold it to the engine block, both T40, both fiendishly tight. I was able to access just using a 1/4-inch drive, so you can get to them. Not the easiest things in the world to get hold of, and you definitely need to do it from underneath the car, but you can access. Well, all the fixings so far have come out fairly easily. The majority, however, have taken the stud out of the block and left the nut rusted onto the end there, so I'm going to have to work out what I'm going to do with that. They all come with these nice big fat, I'm going to guess brass or copper washers. They're not steel. And I've just got one more fixing to undo now. So I've been moving this around quite a lot as I've been getting in there. Probably use a short extension on this one. But I'm just using my standard 1/2-inch drive socket set. And right, there we go, he's off. Oh, that's good news. No special tools so far, just a decent set of Torx bits. It was a 30 and a 40, a flat blade screwdriver, a crosshead screwdriver, and probably could have got away with using a 12-point socket, a standard 12-point socket, but just from experience of working with old Land Rovers. There we go, that should be, oh right, nut came out of that one, that's good. Nut and fat washer. Now there is one fat washer left on this setup. In fact, there's 2, there's one on here as well. So be careful you don't lose the fat washers, is all I'm going to say. Take the manifold off slightly and push it back. Oh, I might have got that one off already, or it fell down. Anyway, we are where we are. So manifold now can come forwards and wiggle straight upwards as it caught on. Lambda sensor wires caught. There we go. Off. Ta-da! Right, let's get this lambda off now and see where we're going to go with this. I'm going to do a visual side-by-side comparison. So studs on the bottom match the holes on the new item. The mountings look the same. Got this additional mounting on this one, don't know what it's for. The stud pattern and the overall dimensions of the top look absolutely bang on. Okay, the lambda sensor goes in at a slightly different angle, but I'm pretty sure that that's all going to work nicely. Now, this one is quite a bit smaller than that one. I did have a go at cleaning up some of these marks on the top here, and it's difficult to know whether that is actually gone right the way through or not. However, when I put a torch underneath the cat, I can actually see light going through the catalytic converter. So it could just be that it's worn out. It could be the cracks that are causing the problem, or something else. I don't know yet. I'm going to hang on to that for the time being. Been given a whole ton of information, which is wrapped around the new cat, around basic things like, read this by the way, I'm not going to read it out for you, but never use exhaust paste above the cat. Don't. Just do not do it. Don't weld above the cat either, because you'll fuck the cat up. Etc, etc, etc. The piece that I took off was the gasket. It's an original factory style gasket. It's got this big heat shield thing around the top there. I'm not going to be able to separate that out. So the new gasket looks like that. Just compared the hole sizes and everything, made sure they look okay, which they do. Lambda sensor came out, looks okay. None of the holes are all bunged or sooted up. It probably is going to be working fine. It certainly was giving the right results when I was using it. Now, the kit that I bought is very helpfully come with new studs. Oh, thank you so much. It's just going to save me a world of pain and getting the old studs out of the old cat. So these three chappies here will just screw into the base of the cat here. I'll get the stickers off it as well. So I have to get all of those off. That needs probably just something to wind it in with, as does that. I just need to grip those with a pair of pliers in order to wind them in. I want them wound in fully. In fact, I'm still turning by hand. Strength of many ants. We've got the gasket to go at the top. There's another bag of fixings, which is here, which includes the lower gasket and a pile of spare studs, which is good, and a pile of nuts, which is good. So I've got 3 nuts for the bottom, should have 7 nuts for the top. Yep. And 3 studs for the top. Don't quite know where the studs are going to go yet, but we'll sort that out. There's a bit of a kink on that gasket, but I think that'll flatten out. We'll see. Worst comes to the worst, it's actually not that difficult to replace this chappie. Yeah, right, let's get these off. Of course, they're never going to come off in one bit, are they? Oh. Get these nuts off the studs. The 3 extra studs that I was given in the installation packet are actually for the bottom of the catalytic converter where it goes to the downpipe. So all I'm going to do here, clean the threads as best I can, clamp the nut, because it's sacrificial, in a vise. Got my extractor, and this is a Mac Tools 8A, 8mm. And they're actually coming out fairly easily. So I suspect it was that they weren't seized on the nuts, but you can see that's on there now. Now all I really need to do then is lightly grip the stud in the vise in order to get the extraction tool off it. The last one. This is quite a nice tool, this one. I don't know where I got this from now. Worth or something like that. Anyway, it's not only just you can extend the handle on it, but also you can so you can work in odd and unusual locations, but it's just the thing I happened to have at the time. Yeah, I got distracted very easily there, didn't I? Right, let's have this one out. This one's a bit tighter. There we go, that's pretty much, they're all looking good. Right, I'll pop those back into the head now, and then I can refit the gasket and the manifold. Before I put all the gasket and everything, the studs and everything back in, I've cleaned up the gasket face. Now, interestingly, there was like a smear of gasket paste across the entire face. Very, very, very thin, but it was this white creamy stuff, so I've had to really go over it. I went over it with the razor blade, which has been taken up, probably put it back in the workshop, then a wire brush and so forth. I've got it all cleaned up. It's happy enough now. So just wind these in a turn or two. You don't need thread lock and shit all over these things, you really don't. Probably says in the manual, absolutely thread lock these, but I can't imagine them being done up to a particularly high torque. On the Rover V8, these things would be done up to about 20 foot-pounds, so hardly anything at all. I've got no idea what it says for this particular engine then. As you can see, I've cleaned up the loom rail. Get all these loosely in. Loosely. And then because I'm lazy, I'm going to use my electric ratchet. You don't have to use an electric ratchet, you can wind these things in by hand, but I just can't be arsed. It's that easy. And yes, I could do it with a ratchet, with a physical ratchet. On, off you come. It's off, and it just means all the studs are in as far as they need to go, which is just about perfect. Yeah, nice big chunky gasket. So we'll slide him into place, and he goes in and onto the studs nicely. That's good. And then we're going to get the manifold. This needs to go back down here, into place, and then onto the studs. There we are, he's on the studs. And I've got 7 nuts, 7 washers. So I'm going to go with putting these 2, 4, 6, 7 washers back on. Big fat chunky washers and new nuts, and these nuts have got like a built-in lock tab on them, which I guess is going to bite against that, but these are very similar to the ones that I use on the Land Rover. Right, I'm trying to drop these into the cat, because obviously the plug on the top where the Lambda goes hasn't got anything on it at the moment. Now, that's all good. I've just double checked bottom pipe that is not being jammed out of the way, which it isn't. 2, 3, and I'll whiz these up. I've got no idea what the torque setting is. I have to Google that. Haven't got a manual for this car yet. Well, David's only owned it for about 4 years, so I've managed to do without a manual so far. A manual would be quite useful, really, wouldn't it? Now, let's get this, which is just the socket, just to nip these up. What I want to do, I think, is just wedge something in that hole, because I don't want anything falling in there. A bit of masking tape over the top should do the job. Just saves anything dropping into the top of the cat, which then means I've got to take the whole fucking thing off again in order to extract the shite that's fallen in, which would definitely make me swear. Right, okay, this needs to go down here. Right, there's two bolts which are tucked down here, which can be difficult to get the washers back on. So, I'm going to have a think about those. Probably the two that I probably could have done with putting the studs in with the washers on and the nuts on already. I don't know. Right, I can get to that one. That's easy enough. Get to it under here. It's a fiddle, but I can get to it. Right, washers on. And that is on. Ish. Thinking about it. It's actually a top hat nut, so what I could do here is put it in the socket, because it's a top hat, it's not going to drop into the socket, and then present it up to the bolt. We're going to have a problem here. I'll tell you one thing, this manifold, the way it's structured is such that I'm not going to be able to get a 1/2 inch socket in there to get it back together again. So I'll have to dig out the 3/8 set, but I might even have a 12mm socket here. Where's my sockets? They've been taken up. No, no, there they are. 12mm. That is 11, 12. 12mm. That's going to hopefully go in and on. Yep, 1/4 inch drive fits beautifully. And then we've got this last one to get in, which looks like it's going to be a right bleeder, a bleeding bleeder. So it might be able to go in around here. Oh, I can just about get in between oil filter and manifold. Just about get the nut, the washer goes in down there, you can see it. Right, so let's get that nut on. I don't know if this is useful or not. You're going to have to let me know, because I know Richard is absolute and utter wank. Right, and then that washer and nut. Right, so we've got all of the nut fixings on there now. Now I need to go and find out what the torque setting is. So let's just nip them all. And then I can torque them up. This loom can go back in, because I don't need this loom hanging out anymore. Okay, torque setting. Right, there's not actually a huge amount to report when it comes to putting this thing back together again. The torque setting on the bolts, I couldn't find it. I did 20 Newton meters. It's fairly easy to get access to those just by removing this top cover here, just to torque those up. I've refitted the bottom mounting, so it's bolted into the engine block. They were just M8 bolts. Connected up the downpipe, reconnected all the electrics. They're all in here. And now it's a case of really, well, popping the cover back on again. I did notice there was a reasonable amount of soot in here. So it might be that the air filter got clogged up somehow. But anyway, let's bung the cover on. So battery back up and connected. Let's see if it works. Are you going to work? I'll just take a quick whiz round the estate just to get it warmed up. But that seems all right. Right, check the emissions now. See if we've got that resolved. What I might do, where was that split? That split was over there somewhere. I'll just get some brake cleaner, spray it in that vicinity and see if the revs go up. It's kind of, it's the cheating way of identifying whether there is a, there's the brake cleaner, cheating way of identifying whether there's a problem with the emissions. No, nothing. Right, let's go and warm it up. I'm going to take it for a run around the block a couple of times.